actually born, in a place that had vanished from the world. When I arrived at the spot, I saw 2 foreign tourists pointing at the plaque and nodding excitedly. To me, the scene had an air of tragicomedy about it. Several meters in front of me, a young man on foot wearing a wide-brimmed black hat crossed the bridge over Gelgevata and disappeared from sight. Where was Rembrandt? Not here. If I try to remember when and where I first stood face to face with Rembrandt, I hear the creaking boards of an old wooden floor. I must have been about 7, holding my father's hand on the threshold of the large press in the Lachenhal, the dark upper gallery of the Leiden Museum, where the syndics inspected cloth samples in the 17th century. As I step inside, the wide oak floorboards sound as if they are cracking under my weight. It's like stepping onto thin ice that might give way at any moment. It was in the Lachenhal that I saw my first Rembrandt, the 1626 Leiden history painting, a jam-packed theatrical scene the subject of which is still not known today. It includes a cameo of the young Rembrandt, peering out from behind the sceptre of an imperial figure. Eyes in the dark, and a head of wild curls which he scratched into the wet paint using the back of his brush. From across the centuries, he met my gaze. My mother grew up in a house on the bank of the Rhine, where the river flows out of Leiden's old city centre. The upstairs apartment on Muscada, where my grandparents spent their entire life together, overlooked a sawmill, the Heesteboom. When the mill sails were up and started turning, my grandfather and I would clamber into his little crimson boat and row across the Rhine. Together we would enter the mill and ascend the narrow steps up to the top, where we had a view of the entire city. From within, the enormous machinery grated and bellowed. The axle went round and round, rotating wooden cogs that in turn caused huge serrated blades to move up and down in a rhythmic roar. In a fountain of wood dust, logs were sawn into pieces as if they were no more substantial than matchsticks. Rembrandt was a miller's son, the fact with which almost all biographies of the painter begin. The importance of these origins should not be downplayed. Rembrandt's father, Herman Gerritzoon, came from a miller's family that had lived and worked in Leiden for 4 generations. He and his family owed their entire existence to the malt mill. They lived on the wind. Over the years, many fanciful tales have been spun about Herman's mill. We read that Rembrandt had a workshop in it as a young boy, learning about the effects of light there because mills have such small windows. Charming fiction. Arnold Houbraken, who published his Lives of Golden Age painters in 1718 to 1721, informs us that the mill was located between Leiderdorp and Koudekerk. An old picture postcard of that Rembrandt mill bears a quatrain that may be rendered, "When Rembrandt painted in his father's mill, still young, the glory of his artistic power was not buried in the clouds of flour. From town to town it sounded and shone." In reality, the mill belonging to Rembrandt's father stood on the western ramparts, right next to the city gate known as Wittepoort. It was a wooden post mill, with no room for a studio or a boy painter. The mill of his ancestors had been located just outside the city on the Rhine. It is marked in a bird's-eye map of Leiden produced by Jacob van Deventer around 1560. In fact, it stood, I swear to God, a stone's throw from the place where my mother grew up and my grandparents spent their entire lives. Through the tall windows came sunbeams that formed bars on the circular hall, fell across the flared stone steps and illuminated the statue of an ancient goddess. It was the day on which my father took me to enroll as a pupil of Leiden's municipal grammar school. I was 11 years old. We knocked on the door of the headmaster's room and entered a miasma of cigar smoke. A man with a friendly face and glasses with rectangular lenses came out from behind his desk. I noticed that the headmaster wore sandals and thick grey woolen socks. As he spoke to my father, I tilted my head to read the titles in the bookcase. Iliad, Odyssey, Metamorphoses, Aeneid. I would devour the ancient literature, although the translations often defeated me.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.